Let's go through some of those export options so that you understand what's going on. So again, if you set your in and out points for an export, then go up to File, Export Media, it will open up the export module. On the left side, we have our source, and you can actually adjust the in and out point of your export down here on this timeline, like so, just by dragging. Or down here, you have this source range, and you can choose it, the sequence in and out points that you set on your timeline before. You can do the entire sequence, or your work area, which if you go back to your timeline and then you click this little 3-lined button right here and say work area bar, this is another bar you can use actually, which comes in handy to limit yourself. Say you have a project that needs to be 30 seconds. You can put this right at the 30-second mark, and that's where you'll know as you work you have to end by right there. And then back in your export settings, if I go Command M or Control M if you're on a PC, you can change it to that work area. Or you're just going to leave it on sequence in and out. That's typically what I do. So going back to the export settings on the right side, if you want to export it just at the settings of your sequence that you imported, you can just click this Match Sequence Settings button, and that's going to export it at the settings of your sequence. And so that might be a good thing if you are quickly exporting something for preview purposes. Typically, I change the format though. Under Format, you have H.264 and then all kinds of other formats, from QuickTime to MPEG-2 to just audio files, MP3. There's also AIFF, waveform. For most purposes, you're going to want to use H.264. It's just the go-to quality for most video makers now when you are posting online videos. Later on, we'll learn about the QuickTime setting when you're exporting a full resolution file. But for us, we're just going to stick to H.264. We mentioned all of these presets over here. You can create presets, and I also did that. See this YT Quick 1080? It's the YouTube Quick 1080 settings that I use, which basically sets everything, the target bit rate, the maximum bit rate, but it also matches the sequence settings for whatever sequence I'm exporting. And you can create new presets by changing all of the settings down here and then clicking this button right here to save it. It's not going to let me because I am on a preset right now, but say I change this frame rate to 2997 and then I say save preset, I could save this as the YouTube Quick 1080 2997 preset. We saw here, this is the output name. Clicking that will allow you to change the title of your video and where you save it. If you just want to export the audio for some reason, you can do that, or just the video. This summary gives us all of the information about our output and our source. And then down here we have different tabs. Over on the left we have different effects. You can do things like apply lookup tables or Lumetri looks, which is a preset effect that we'll go over in another future lesson. You can add image overlays like a watermark, name overlays, timecode overlays, things that are more for professional video editors to use. The video tab, this is what we saw before, where we have our settings for the size of our export. So we can change the size to whatever we want. Typically, we are looking at a 16 by 9 frame. So 1280 by 720 is an HD format, 1920 by 1080. And with this little button right here locked, it's going to lock the width and height aspect ratio. So if I uncheck that, I can make this a perfect square if I do 1000 by 1000 pixels. But that's not going to look good because it's actually going to squeeze this into a square. So we want to match the actual aspect ratio of our project, 16 by 9. Frame rate, 2997. Sometimes you might be exporting for different places on TV. You might need to use 2997 or 5994. Or you might want to just match the frame rate of what you shot, 23976. Field order comes from how your video is actually output on a screen. Actually, your video is broken down into lots of lines. So if your height is 1080, it's 1080 lines. And it's just the way that it appears. And so for most cases, we're just going to use progressive. So just leave that as progressive. Same with the aspect. Square pixels is generally what you want to check unless there is a specific case and someone asks you to export it at these other options, depending on if you are projecting it with a certain type of projector or something like that. TV standard, PAL versus NTSC. As it says, when you hover over this, US and Japan use NTSC, Europe and Asia use PAL. It's just the way that it's been for a long time. So if you're watching this and you're in Europe, you're probably going to be shooting and exporting in PAL. Leave profile and level at main and 4.1. We saw this render at maximum depth. It's really interesting that this is an option. I don't know why Premiere Pro doesn't automatically render at maximum depth. So I just checked that to make sure that it has the best export quality. Bitrate settings. This is what really affects the size of your file. Bitrate encoding, you have options CBR, VBR, 1 pass, and VBR 2 pass. Choose between VBR, 1 pass, and 2 pass. 1 pass will make your export quicker, but 2 passes means it actually goes through the export twice. It goes through all of the frames of your video twice, and it makes the colors and everything look a little bit better. The target bitrate and the max bitrate. The bitrate is basically how much information in terms of file size is happening per second. So your target would be 16 megabits per second. Your max is how much it's limited to. So the max will be 16. Generally, these two are the same. You could lower this if you want, and if you lower the target bitrate, you'll see down here the estimated file size decreases. So if you need to export a small file size, you can just lower it down here. Once you get past 16, when you are exporting a 1920 by 1080 film or video, there's no real reason to increase the target bit rate past 16 because it's not actually going to make your video look better. Each size has a specific bit rate that is sort of the maximum bit rate that matters for that size of video, and 16 is about that for 1920 by 1080. There's these other tabs right here. So like audio, you have different audio formats. If you know you have to export Dolby Digital, if you're playing it in a big theater that requires Dolby Digital, that's an option. For us, we're just going to leave it at AAC, and down here, the audio settings, we're leaving the sample rate at 48,000 hertz. You might need it to be 44,100 hertz or 32,000 hertz, but for most of our projects, just leave it at 48,000. Channels, stereo, unless you want to make your mix mono, you can, but then that's going to just make the same exact sound come from both the left and right speakers. Stereo, if you have things on left and right speakers, a little bit different. If you recorded your audio in stereo, it's going to export at stereo or 5.1 surround sound. And audio quality, just leave that at high. For audio bit rate, leave this at 320, the highest kilobits per second. So the higher the bit rate, the higher the quality. So just leave that at the highest. Multiplexer, captions, publish. These are just some more advanced options, like if you want to add captions to, or if you have created captions in Premiere Pro and you want to export them as a specific file, or if you want to publish directly to things like Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, or Adobe Creative Cloud, you can do that. You just have to sign into your accounts to do so. And then down below, we saw this use maximum render quality. Again, it's just an extra box you have to click. I suggest clicking to make sure that it is the best quality. And then the other one I just want to mention quickly is this import into project. If you want the export to be imported into your project automatically, you can just import it with that. Last time we just clicked this export button and it exported straight from Premiere Pro, but you can click this Q button and it will open up the export in Adobe Media Encoder. What this allows us to do is export in the background while we continue to work in Adobe Premiere Pro. Sometimes I'm batch editing a lot of projects at one time, and so I want to export a long project, and sometimes it's not just a 1-minute project that takes a couple minutes. Maybe it's a 30-minute documentary or a 2-hour long event that I'm editing, and I'll want to just start the export but be able to continue to edit other projects or different versions of the same project right within Premiere Pro. So I do that queue option and it opens it up in Adobe Media Encoder. Here we can go through and change our export settings. They also have presets on the right hand side as well. On the left you have your H.264 setting option, and if you click that, it brings us back here to this window where you can change all of your settings. The preset, if you click that, again it goes back here. There are different presets that you can choose straight from Adobe Media Encoder like we saw before. And then the output file, you click that to choose where you want to save it. Then to start this, you can just press this start queue. And the reason why it's a queue is because you can actually add more projects to this. For example, when I'm editing a course, I often edit multiple lessons at once. So I'll have 10 lessons that I want to export. So I'll just be editing them in Premiere Pro, then export them and add them to the queue and continue editing while all of them export. So you can see here, after I press the button, it starts to export, and we are on our way to having a great project exported. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. There's also lots of great resources on Adobe's website on the different codecs, the different formats that would take too long to explain in a video, but I will be glad to help point you in the right direction if you need any help. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in another video.